Bear with. Hello. Just waiting for my guest to arrive, but it's nice to see you.
You too.
And Penny's going to join us as well. It's really nice to see people's faces. This is the first time I've met you both. So hello.
Hi.
Hi. Now Tonya should be with us. She may be having issues, so I just got my phone up. I better open my Instagram in case. Anyway, let me share with you, because I don't think either of you have been to these cafes before.
No, it's the first one.
Okay, so as you might imagine, it's really informal. When Tonya gets here, she and I will have a little conversation that introduces the topic and what she's about. Usually for around 20 minutes. And then if you're all feeling brave, we can either carry on the conversation or you can jump in, ask questions, but you know, there's no formality about this. This is not a webinar. This is meant to be a friendly space where we all feel comfortable and get to know one another a little bit.
Right.
And it may just end up being me talking about the brain, but she will be here. I can kick off a bit.
Are you joining us, Jackie?
Were there any particular burning questions you had in your mind before you came?
45 minutes.
Not burning on my part, just
No.
to understand more the brain and what goes on and why I don't have one anymore.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. All right then. Well, before Tonya gets it, because Tonya's got a really different take. The reason I connected with her, she and I have hosted a couple of Clubhouse meetings, and if Clubhouse isn't your thing and you don't know what it is, it doesn't matter. Good, everyone's here to say it for Tonya. That's great. I'm just going to send her a quick reminder. Bear with me a second. I was speaking to her not moments ago, so just amuse yourselves for a second. Tonya. Is that her?
So where in the world are you, Chris?
I'm in Worcestershire.
We're in Kent.
You're in Kent. I'm London. Actually, I'm not Chris. I'm Jackie. It's Chris is my husband.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. And I'm the menopausal me one.
That's absolutely fine. Let's just give her.
Did you say you're in Kent?
Yes, yeah, Rochester.
Right. I've just been to Whitstable, actually.
That's just down the road.
Very nice.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Whereabouts in London are you?
I'm North London.
No, I'm originally a South East Londoner, but I lived in Central and East London as well. But I'm Rochester now. Yeah,
right.
Thankfully.
Yes, I bet.
Ready to go home. Still officially working in London, but not been there for since last March.
Since last March. Yeah.
Right. Is that a nice thing?
It is in some ways, but not having to commute anymore is lovely. But I don't like working at home. I miss working with people. So
right. Yeah, I kind of work from home anyway, so I hasn't been such a huge change.
Yeah.
For me really. But Whitstable was lovely being there. We just had a rainy weekend though, which was such a shame.
Oh.
And then the weekend after, which was last weekend, was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get to eat any oysters? I know they had some problems with the oysters down there recently.
I didn't, but I had mussels, which I love.
Yeah, good stuff.
Lovely.
Tonya has arrived. Hooray! Right. What I'm going to do, I'm going to leave everyone's mics open, but if you get any background noise in your room, you know, people coming in and out or whatever, if you could mute yourselves, that would be great. But otherwise, we want to keep it informal. Tonya, hello.
Hi, sorry for the delay. I had problems with Zoom getting in.
I thought as much.
Yes.
But I'm glad you're here. So I was just explaining the format, because you've not been in one of these groups either. So the format is generally really informal. So you and I have a quick chat for around 20 minutes where you share stuff about, anything you want to share, frankly. And we keep it informal. If anyone wants to interject with a question while we're chatting, that's fine. Otherwise, we'll kind of open up and have it more conversational and Q&A-ish at the end, but it's most definitely not a webinar. So I was just explaining a few moments ago, before I had a moment of, I wonder where Tonya is, that I connected with you on Instagram, and the reason was that Tonya and I have ended up hosting a couple of Clubhouse events. And the reason I connected with her is because although I'm a menopause anxiety freedom coach, which is a bit of a mouthful, I sometimes think that the menopause conversation gets a little bit hijacked by the whole hormone piece and HRT, and that's not, for me, that's not the whole picture. There's more that goes on, and there's more ways we can help ourselves, and a better understanding. I come very much from the neuroscience side of things, which is not to say I don't sometimes get a bit woo-woo as well and look at more, subtle, shall we call them subtle ways of doing things. But Tonya, please just share with us your story and background, and bring in anything you think is useful for us.
Okay, thank you, Shirley, and hi everybody. Sorry for the delay, and it's lovely to be here with you all this morning. I presume you're this morning. I don't know what part of the world you're all from. I'm sure there's a mix, maybe. But yeah, my name is Tonya Keane, and I'm the founder of the Women's Brain Project, as Shirley has mentioned. And I suppose my reasoning behind that project is that I myself experienced quite neurological difficulties at one time in my life. Well, actually twice. But pretty severe when I was diagnosed with ME, and I struggled for about 7 years with really, really severe neurological dysfunction. And, I was told that there was nothing we could do, and you'd be left in a wheelchair for the rest of your days, and just to get on with it. And of course, I couldn't get on with it. I just knew there had to be another way. So over 7 years, I worked really hard to get myself back, and to get my brain back, and my mobility, and all the other things that were out. So that led me to the big interest in the brain, because I actually had to save my own brain. So I came out of that, and, I did do well, and I recovered, and I'm not in a wheelchair, and I walk and I swim every day. And then 7 years later, I'm 7 years older. So coming out of that, I went straight into perimenopause and the menopausal journey. And again, my brain got hit quite severely. And I was absolutely shocked. Nobody had ever said, this is what happens to you at, this age. And I just couldn't get over how neurologically dysfunctional I had become again. So I felt quite, alone and scared. And again, I went back to, what I knew in my studies, and started to just delve deeper into this situation that we know as, the menopausal transition and the knock-on effect it has on our brains. So that led me to where, I am today. And I'm just amazed at how many women are struggling. I get kind of messages all the time from very frightened women, wondering what's happening to their brains, and very concerned because, they might have had a family member, or have a family member who, sometimes they're even caring for that family member, who are suffering from neurological degeneration. And it's a frightening place to be. And it's a frightening, thing to think, am I going to be, like my mom or my grandmother or whatever? So, and I think the big thing now is that there's amazing research coming out, and over the last couple of months in particular, there's been, Dr. Mosconi has brought out some really, really amazing research, particularly on the menopausal brain. And that looks very promising in terms of, our brain does go through a knock, and it does take quite a hit, but our brain is amazing at adapting, and it will adapt, and it will come out the other side if you do you know, X, Y, and Z. And I think that's brilliant. You know, that's so reassuring for women who are going through, you know, difficult brain issues at the moment, like brain fog, lack of memory, which are so common. And, you know, there's a lot of depression associated with, you know, this phase, and anxiety, as you know, Shirley. But there's a lot we can do to support our brains. And that's kind of, yeah, that's my role, is to educate women to do that. Because we are at risk, you know, there's no doubt about it. You know, we experience things like a lot of inflammation when we lose our hormones. We have issues with blood sugars and insulin control, and blood sugar and insulin are two of the biggest drivers of Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's is higher in women than in men. So we are very at risk. So yeah, so that's my big love, and that's my big interest. And I have lived through it myself and come out the other side. So I'm hoping that other women can do the same. So that's kind of what I'm about.
That's really interesting. And I hope you're going to share some of your knowledge with us. I'm sure you are.
Yes.
But I wanted to jump in because things you said there, and I thought, you know, you've heard my story before, and maybe some of you here, I know some of you have heard my story, but you're absolutely right. That kind of not knowing what the hell is going on, having no idea this is anything to do with menopause, and that fear. You know, I had an elderly mother at the time who was in care, and yeah, I had a real fear that this was dementia, that this was the beginning, that,
Yeah.
and that compounded the fear that you have with your own parents of, you know, what's going on with them, and you want to be there for them and you want to look after them, but at the same time you're really scared about yourself and what the hell's going on. So thank you for that. I mean, you're right, my emphasis, you know, my understanding was about how the brain's impacted by anxiety, and so I was perhaps like you, coming from a different experience of thinking, hang on a minute, you know, I've done this brain stuff in different ways. There's a thing called neuroplasticity. There's different ways to cut this than simply going down the HRT route. And you know, perhaps like you, just finding my way through it and putting the pieces of the jigsaw together in ways that perhaps not so many other people were doing. But anyway, share with us what kind of stuff, well, I don't know, share with us anything, what kind of stuff you've done for yourself, and how women can make a real difference, I think.
Okay, so what did I do for myself? I think in these scenarios, when we experience, you know, cognitive decline or, you know, brain degeneration, and, you know, I hate to say it, but we've all got some at this stage in our lives. And we have to remember that, you know, any of the dementias, Alzheimer's, you know, Parkinson's, any of those degenerative diseases, they don't happen yesterday. These are 20, 30 years prior in the making, silently, you know, ticking away. And when we walk into the doctor's office and we get that diagnosis, you know, that's kind of like, you know, that's a point of, you know, can I return from this? So we need to, I think, go back a little bit and, you know, not end up in the doctor's office getting that diagnosis. We need to come back and say, okay, you know, I have a certain amount of degeneration. We all have, but it's a case of halting it now in its tracks, stop there. And as women going through the menopausal journey as well, as I said, 1 out of 4 women will be diagnosed. And it's happening now as young as 45 years of age, which is absolutely frightening. So, you know, intervening now in that window of, you know, the menopausal journey where our hormones are declining, we are neurologically suffering, is the best time. It's such a window to just jump in there and go, okay, what can I do to halt and to stop any further degeneration so that I can live on, you know, to my 80s, even 90s. You know, longevity is really on the cards these days. So, you know, it takes a very multi-layered approach. It's not just one thing that's going to fix our brains. And the research shows us that now, that, you know, yes, diet is absolutely huge. Lifestyle is huge. Exercise is huge. Our social connections are huge. Our stress levels are huge. are we doing what are we doing what's bringing us joy every day? Are we in a job that we hate and we hate our boss? You know, that's no good for us. And these are all kind of all the little pieces to the puzzle. You know, my area is mainly food and nutrition. So I come at it from, you know, a very dietary side of things. And I do know plenty of women who do go down the HRT route, and they do bring their brains back somewhat, but it's not enough, because, you know, you could be on HRT, but you're not getting your dietary measures right. And, you know, as midlife women, we suffer from issues with our blood sugar, our inflammation levels, as I said earlier, have changed due to lower hormones. And those two things alone are huge for you know, your risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. And the metabolic changes that go on in midlife are huge. That's why a lot of women say, oh my God, I've gained so much weight. I can't get this weight off my middle, you know, my belly, my abdomen. I just can't do it. And that's where, you know, we need to look at, what do we need to change? What do we need to tweak now that our metabolism has changed? You know, there's so much in there. We have to look at liver, we have to look at gut, we have to look at our blood sugars, we have to look at our inflammation levels. So there's no one thing, you know, that's going to fix this. It's a multi-layered approach, and that's what I had to do with my own recovery and bringing my own brain back from my menopausal journey, was that I had to kind of lay it all out on the table and go, right, you know, what can I do diet wise? What does my body need? What does it not need? What does it like? What does it thrive on? What does, you know, it reject? What lifestyle measures can I put in? You know, am I enjoying my life, my work, my financial situation, my relationships? It's such a mixed bag, and it's a lot of work, but it's, you know, it's possible. And I think this period of in our lives is such a great window to actually go, okay, this is about me. You know, this is about me kind of opening it all up, looking at it all. At this point, a lot of us have reared our children, so it is your time. And, you know, I think if you get that recipe right and you get all the pieces together, I think there's no reason why you shouldn't go on and live a wonderful, healthy, you know, dementia-free, Alzheimer's-free life, for sure.
Yeah. I think you're right, and I've always say it's a multi-layered approach, and I think I get a little bit. I know I get a little bit cross sometimes when people, you know, like us, suggest that, you know, if you just do what I'm telling you to do, that's the only thing you need to do, because everything else will be sorted. And that's not true. That's not true of HRT. You know, I, like you, have clients who have HRT as well. You know, I specifically partner with HRT specialists who know that that's not the only thing, and therefore they will refer to, you know, people that specialize in exercise or mindset,
Absolutely,
because they recognize that too. And you're right. I think sometimes what you've described was absolutely spot on. If you're in the midst of that whole, you know, what the hell's going on, I feel terrible, you know, and because suicide is quite high amongst women in midlife as well.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
When you're in that place, in that really low place, it can be quite hard to think, that sounds like a mountain to climb. You know, how?
Yeah, it does.
How do I get in the base camp? So where would you, you know, I know how I would approach it, but where would you approach it when you were trying to get people into that base camp of feeling not overwhelmed, not daunted, but just beginning to make some changes that can transform their lives for the,
Yeah.
you know, and it is beautifully transformative. You know, we've had conversations here in this cafe in the past few weeks where we've talked about this crazy point that you don't believe exists until it does, which is, oh my goodness, this is the incredible opportunity. This is amazing. I'm so glad this happened. And that does sound like a mad thing to say, but it does happen, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely, it does. And I think the big thing, you know, to remember is that this is a point where everything can feel very overwhelming, everything. And I know I've been there. I've felt at times extremely overwhelmed by things that would never, ever, ever bother me normally. And, you know, you're kind of wondering, well, why do these things feel so big and so overwhelming now? But, you know, it is an overwhelming time. And, you know, I think we are a little bit more vulnerable, and we're a little bit more, what would you say, needing more TLC for ourselves, reassurance. You know, it's a time when a lot of women drop confidence levels and so on. And I think, you know, making changes with all of that going on can be quite difficult. And I know a lot of women who are eating, they know all the right things that they should be doing, but they're eating all the wrong things. And it's purely because they're in a state of comfort. They're needing comfort. And what do? We turn to comfort foods, you know, and they're eating, some women are eating more and more. And I know that I did myself. I couldn't get enough comfort foods into me, you know, and I'm a nutritionist. And it's purely because we're needing love and care. And some of us aren't getting that externally. You know, our loved ones don't understand necessarily what we might be going through, what our needs are. And I think, you know, in terms of myself, and what I would suggest is that you start there. You start by just acknowledging that, you know, this is a time when you possibly need to give yourself a little bit of ease, a little bit of care, a little bit of love for yourself. Understand that you're going through something massive. You will come out the other side intact, in one piece. And, you know, take a step back and don't kind of think, oh my God, I've got to make all these changes. I've got to lose the weight. I've got to get my brain back. I've got to get on the treadmill. I've got, you know, that's just adding more and more and more overwhelm onto you. And I would say, you know, one tiny little step at a time. You know, this is a journey. And do not do this in an overwhelming state of mind that I have to get my diet right. I'm afraid of brain degeneration. And it's small steps, really small steps. And those small steps build up to the bigger picture. And, you know, simple things like, you know, change up one of your meals a day, like, you know, at lunchtime, for example, eat the salad instead of the sandwich, or, you know, just simple things that don't feel overwhelming, that don't feel like you've got to go and clear out the cupboards of all the, you know, the junk food and go on a mad shop for all the healthy stuff and spend a fortune. It's not about that. It's about just one little tiny change or adjustment that will lead to the bigger picture. And by doing that, you start to create not the diet, but the lifestyle. And it's about a lifestyle. It's not about being on a diet. You know, I don't agree with that. It's about being, you know, creating your lifestyle that works for you, that, you know, is easy to manage and easy to maintain, that doesn't feel like an epic chore, that doesn't feel huge and like a huge mountain to climb, and doesn't feel like, you know, I hear women as like, I hate doing this. And it's like, well, you know, if you hate doing it, then let's find another way, you know, or, you know, it's not to be done like that. And that's my advice to anybody starting out, is that you start so small. You even start, you know, educating yourself, reading little bits and pieces about what this time is, you know, what that means to you. Some people come at it from a spiritual level. Some people come at it from getting to know themselves better. Some people come at it from, you know, the health point of view. They want to get better health. Others come at it where, you know, they go off on a big life adventure, or, you know, some say goodbye to relationships, you know, they leave their husband, whatever. You know, there is a change, that's for sure. But my advice is, don't let that change be overwhelming, whatever it is. It's just you're gonna end up in a, you know, in a state.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
Yeah, and I say exactly the same. I'm sure everybody hears everyone say it, but I always say it's tiny steps, because
Absolutely.
It's got to feel manageable, or you won't do it. It will just make things worse.
Yeah.
And it always has to be on your terms. It's not about an expert saying, you know, you could download off the internet 20 things you need to do to get yourself through menopause. You know, well, lovely. That might work for someone, but actually for most of us, it doesn't. We do need it to be really personalized, because your journey is yours. It's unique. It's individual. It's totally personal. And so whilst we all go through this kind of common thing, and we share some of those experiences, which is what this community is about, we're also entirely different. Like, you know, our DNA is different. And so why would a precise scripted agenda for what happens next and how it happens next, why would that be right for you? Might.
Yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
yeah, pulling out a lottery number. So anyway, I'm mindful. Goodness, time really does fly. Does anyone want to jump in and ask any questions or just share something?
I'd love to know what some of the key foods are that would be good for the brain.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Is that Chris?
It's Jackie, actually.
Oh, Jackie, sorry,
Yeah.
just
AKA Chris.
Hi, Jackie, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good. So key foods for brain health. You're looking at a good intake or abundance of vegetables, and they would be primarily non-starchy vegetables. So you're talking about, if you have your plate is halved. So half is your non-starchy vegetables. The rest of the plate is made up with protein, which is, consists of your fish or your chicken or your eggs or your legumes, your beans. And then the next portion is your good fats, which the brain really thrives on. So you're talking about things like your avocado, a dash of olive oil on your vegetables or on your chicken. Any of those, or a nice guacamole, which actually has the avocado fats and it has the olive oil in it, good fats, protein, and your non-starchy veg. You can go down the carbohydrate route, but I would suggest that we tend to overeat on carbohydrates. We have our plate full of pasta and the sauce and vegetables if we're lucky. That bowl of pasta is actually too much. If you can see my hand size here, that's how much carbohydrates we need, which is actually just the little bit that fits in our fist. If there's any more than that, the body doesn't, that's all it needs. If there's any more than that, it actually doesn't know what to do with it or where to go with it. And that's how we run into bother then with things like extra weight that feeds into blood sugar imbalances, because believe it or not, that high amount of carbohydrates will spike your blood sugar really high, really quickly. And then it will drop you very quickly. So things like white rice, white pastas, any of the white, and I'm not saying don't eat pastas or anything but look for kind of more, healthy versions. And dropping your, by spiking your blood sugar that high and dropping it that low really quick is really, really damaging from the brain, because the brain needs a steady supply of glucose. And if you're going up and down like that, which a lot of people are in the day, because, pasta might be just one meal, they might have had a coffee, and believe it or not, coffee does spike blood sugars. And, they might have had a snack then, which might consist of a Twix or whatever. So you're like this throughout the day, you're up and down, and the brain absolutely hates that. It needs a steady supply like that, an even keel, not this up and down. And that up and down eventually is one of the contributors to Alzheimer's in later life. Poor blood sugar regulation is one of the biggest contributors to Alzheimer's in women, along with inflammation. And a lot of the foods that we eat, unfortunately, are inflammatory, like sugar, for example. So, my rule of thumb is and there's something I do is I eat really well in the week, and then I allow myself at the weekend to have a piece of cake or something nice with my family, because, it's hard not to enjoy, going out or, you know, sharing our celebrations with us. So I kind of live by the 80-20 rule, whereas 80% of the time I'm really, really on top, you know, I'm eating really well. And then if something arises at the weekend, I will join in and I will enjoy some cake or some, you know, it was ice cream last weekend because it was so hot. So yeah. And in research, in all the research coming out now in Alzheimer's, just to give you an example, they're actually calling it, the researchers and scientists, a lot of doctors now are calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes.
Yeah,
You might have come across that. So that kind of says it all in terms of blood sugar regulation. And this particular time in our lives is a very vulnerable time for insulin resistance. And this is why you have a lot of women who are, you know, midlife getting diagnosed with diabetes and so on. And that's due to, you know, lack of insulin regulation due to, you know, our drops in hormones. So really important that we're eating really well to just keep that even keel of blood sugars. And in the research that has been carried out on, you know, what are the good diets for the brain, they're showing good results in the Mediterranean diet and the Japanese diet. And both of those are abundant in oils and fishes, and particularly the Japanese diet, they would have a lot of fermented foods in there, which is prebiotics for the gut. So those two diets in particular are showing some good results so far.
I'm really glad you mentioned the fermented foods, because disclaimer, I know nothing about nutrition, just what I do, but I got really heavily into understanding more about the gut, you know, because I was interested in the brain, the gut-brain.
Yeah, absolutely, huge connection.
Yeah, how many neurons actually live in your gut? I used to think it was all in the brain.
Yeah.
But it's COVID that got me focused on increasing the healthy bacteria in my gut and the links with inflammation and illness, and then linking that back into menopause and those spikes. You know, I don't know the science around it fully, but I do now make sure I take fermented foods, because if you don't already have a healthy gut and you eat all those lovely, correct me if I'm wrong, Tonya, but you eat all those lovely fruit and vegetables, they're not necessarily doing the good that they could, because you've not got the healthy bacteria in your gut. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. The foods that we eat in terms of fruit and vegetables, you know, especially the fibrous fruits, they are our probiotics. And a lot of people will actually supplement with probiotics, but what a lot of people aren't doing is realizing that probiotics, which, you know, you're putting in through your supplement or your fruit and your vegetables, actually they're living bacteria, so they need food, and the food that probiotics need is prebiotics. That's the food they eat, that's the food they live on to flourish and thrive in your gut, so that they can, you know, bring up their populations, so that you don't have what they call dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of good gut bacteria. So it's really important to put in the prebiotics, which is the food for your probiotics, and the prebiotic foods are fermented foods. So you're totally onto the right track there, Shirley. And, you know, we have to remember, like you said earlier, that gut-brain connection is absolutely huge. And, you know, 80% of our serotonin is made up in our gut. So much is coming from our gut. So, yeah, hugely important. And, you know, all it takes is even, you know, a teaspoon or a tablespoon of fermented foods per day, which isn't a lot asked, and it's easy to do. So yeah, definitely, you're definitely onto one, Shirley, there. Yeah.
Mara's asked a question: what if you're intolerant of fermented food?
Yes, that can be the case as well. Absolutely. A lot of people have that, you know, where they have SIBO, which is small bacterial overgrowth. A lot of women actually in midlife, one of the biggest symptoms which tends to kick off in perimenopause is one of the first symptoms for a lot of women is problems with the gut. You know, suddenly they can't tolerate, or they become intolerant, or they become very sensitive, where they develop food sensitivities in menopause. So for those people who can't tolerate, I am actually one of those people who can't take a lot of fermented foods, and I nearly killed myself trying over the years. There is certain supplements you can get, you know, in the prebiotic form that actually address that issue of people being unable to, you know, to take. They're specially formulated for people who can't eat fermented foods. And I tend to, you know, myself, I tend to, you know, if I'm very fortunate, I grow a lot of vegetables here at home, and there's a lot of, you know, probiotics and prebiotics in the soil. And, you know, this is one thing that kind of commercial growing and commercial vegetable production is doing, is it's killing off all of that. So, you know, if you are fortunate enough to go down to the organic store, you know, and there is some soil on it or whatever, don't be absolutely anal about scrubbing it or cleaning it. It won't kill you, but it actually is one of the best probiotics and prebiotics that exist. And they actually make supplements now that are from soil derived pro and prebiotics. So yeah,
I didn't know that. That's
yeah,
really
yeah.
And you know, I liked that you mentioned it, because this is so valid, and this is why I get a bit frustrated with the whole HRT argument, where we're relating. Yeah, it's a good dirt. Well done, Mary.
Good one, Mary. Yeah.
You know, relating the production of serotonin, and I've mentioned this before, from estrogen, that when estrogen levels drop, serotonin production drops. But estrogen is not your only source of serotonin. You know, we just talked about the gut is a key source, but also what negatively influences that serotonin production is what you alluded to earlier, is where you're not happy, you know, in your job, in your life, in your relationships, or if you're just overwhelmed by everything. So it's a bit of a vicious circle, or a downward vortex.
Absolutely.
Where, you know, when we get stressed or anxious, we elevate cortisol and adrenaline potentially, and you can't run cortisol at the same time as serotonin. So you deplete your serotonin levels by being anxious. So
absolutely,
exactly as you said earlier, if you work on these multiple levels, you know, you don't have to do it all at once. In fact, definitely don't do it all at once, but, you know, work with what feels right for you, whether that's a book, a community like this, with a specialist, you know, like Tonya, or someone else, in the place that feels right for you. And sometimes that's a yoga practitioner, sometimes that's you know, Mary, I wish she had her volume on, because she does amazing things with cacao and ceremonies, and encouraging women to, I'll use her phrase, she'll love me doing this, fly your freak. And there she is. You know, or sometimes you just want to work with someone like me and go, oh, I'll just get my head straight, you know, but recognize that serotonin production, which is what your brain requires, can be achieved in a myriad of different ways. It's not just about HRT. So if you can't get the HRT you need, or you don't want to be on HRT, or it just doesn't work for you, there's a whole host of other ways to do this. And there's not a one size fits all, and there's not a one solution for everybody. You know?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, talking about, you know, for women who don't want to go down, you know, the HRT route, I mean, you know, our bodies still do produce hormones, albeit at a lower level. And, you know, that isn't happening in the ovaries anymore. That's, you know, your adrenal glands take over at this stage, and they start to produce, you know, the amounts. It is lower, but they're still producing. It's not that you're completely without hormones. And, you know, what I see is that a lot of women come into this journey absolutely on full throttle. You know, they've been go since in their 20s. You know, they've raised their families, they're career women, they've so much going on, and they come to the point where their adrenals need to kick in and produce, you know, the hormones that are necessary now for survival. And the adrenals can't. They're exhausted. They're absolutely exhausted. Hence why we hear loads of, you know, the terms adrenal fatigue and inadequate adrenal production. And this is huge. There's so many women who come into this journey with the tank absolutely emptied. They're all used up. They've put so much of their energy, their time, their resources into, you know, rearing children and so on, that by the time they get to this stage, those adrenals can't, you know, adequately produce those hormones. So it's a really good, as we said, you know, to get all these things in place, you know, the less stress, the, you know, the lifestyle measures, the diets, you know, eat to feed and nurture those adrenals, because they will give you those hormones. But you've got to look after them. You've got to love them. And they absolutely hate stress, hate it.
They do. Can I just jump in there quickly? Because
Yes.
a lot of women interpret that whole, oh, therefore I'll give up my job, you know, I'll stop doing things that cause me stress. And that might be the right thing, because it might be part of your midlife transition where you actually, I hate this job. I've always hated this job. Why do I do this job? I don't know why I do this job. In that case, great, give it up, you know, do something incredible, fly your freak. But sometimes women give up jobs they actually love because they persuade themselves, and other people help out, that they're no longer competent. Like, my brain doesn't function anymore, it's gone, it's shot, I'm stupid, I forget things, I can't find my vocabulary, I'm an idiot, you know, whatever our self-talk is saying. And that's not true either. So don't do okay, I need to remove my stress, I'll remove my job. That's like just chopping your head off, right? No, don't do that.
The big this is something that, you know, I had to learn, obviously having ME, you know, it's you know, it's severe fatigue and adrenal issues, and, you know, bedridden for years, etc. But, you know, what I had to learn was that you know, and my adrenals were absolutely tanked. You know, my testing showed I had very little cortisol production. I was hospitalized so many times with barely any cortisol, you know, there at all. And that's, you know, that leads to death, basically. So I had to look at that scenario very well. And hence why I kind of, you know, laid out my life on the table and went, right, you know, what's good for me, what's not. And, you know, I did go through a period of like, I'm gonna, like you say, I'm gonna give up on that. I'm gonna, you know, that's causing me too much stress. And I'm glad that there were certain things I didn't. But at the time I did look at it like you're saying. But what I learned in all of that is that we're gonna have stress. Stress is an everyday, you know, occurrence. There's always going to be something. We can't avoid it as such. You know, we can choose to live a life with less stress. And, you know, that's what I've certainly done. I've created a life where I don't actually, you know, have as much stress as I used to. But, you know, there's everyday stress is going to come knocking on the door. But the big thing is, you know, not avoiding that, because a certain amount of stress is healthy, believe it or not. It's how you react to the stress and what your body experiences while it's going through that. And is it, you know, is it completely kind of, oh, you know, I'm so stressed? Because it's your reaction to the stress. And that's what's really important. And that can be the difference between you, you know, like in my case, I used to crash. You know, if I had a stressful event that would impact me that much. And I realized that it wasn't the actual stress or the event, it was how my body was responding, how I was responding. That was what was taking me down. And once I kind of switched that around, like, and learned ways of how to deal with it and not put my body, or not allow my body to go through so much of a reaction, a completely different ball game, you know?
Yeah, completely. I'm mindful of time. I mean, you probably realise I could talk for ages, but we normally close these out at 40 minutes, and I don't want to kick everyone out, but I don't at the same time want to make people think, oh God, it's dragging on. So just for a few more minutes, if people want to hang around for 5 more minutes, either do you want to jump in and ask a question, or if you're feeling a bit uncomfortable about speaking, hello, is that Belinda? Belinda, do you want to jump in and ask a question? Have you got you unmuted? Fire away.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of things. Is it the case that the brain is actually damaged in menopause? And what would you say about what do you have to say about meditation as a tool?
Is that for me or for Shirley?
Yeah, Tonya,
You
you
can, yeah.
take that. I'll answer the meditation one, but the rest is for you.
Yeah. Is
Well,
there
I mean,
actually
I'm not a meditation expert. I do use it myself. It has been a lifesaver. You know, I was one of those people that years back, you know, friends would say to me, "Oh, you should try meditation." I was going, "No, I've no time for that." You know, oh God, it's not for me. But actually, you know, when I did settle down and realize that I needed to put some you know, tools in place that I could use, meditation was one of them. And yes, I highly recommend it. There's studies out now, you know, the research is very much in favor of it, especially in the menopausal years as you're going through that change, because it helps to kind of calm down, you know, the fight or flight response that we're in, and that kind of overreacting that we're experiencing, and the overwhelming, and you know, it certainly makes me a more pleasant person as well. You know, that it's just, yeah, I highly recommend the meditation. In terms of, what was the other question?
Does the menopause cause actual physical damage to the brain?
What it does do, and this is just brand new research that's come out, it came out in June from Dr. Mosconi and her team in the States, and they studied the menopausal brain because there's very little studies been actually done on the female menopausal stage and what's happening to her brain. And they did find a 20% shrinkage in the brain and an 11% lack of energy reaching the brain. But what they did find, which is really, really interesting, is that, you know, that it does alter the brain structure. It does alter the metabolic profile of the brain, and it does contribute to the endocrine aging of us as women. But the most amazing good news that came out of it was that our brains are adaptable, and our brains will adapt to our new, it's basically a new brain. You know, we're running now on slightly different than before. As I said, you're 20% shrinkage. And her studies were just absolutely fascinating. You know, that if we hang in there, our brain has this amazing ability to adapt to the changes and the lower levels of hormones that are now running and operating our brain. So, you know, while it's sad in one sense that we do have this kind of loss of function of our brains, it's also fantastic to know that our brains are hugely adaptable. And that's something that was not known in the female brain up until her research was released last month. And if you want to check it out, it's Dr. Mosconi. She's the author as well of the XX Brain.
Do you want to
fascinating read? And you know, there's not damage as such happening. I mean, as I said, our damage has already been happening over the 20, 30 years. It's just at this point, we have lower hormone levels on top of whatever we've, you know, damage we've already occurred. So this is why now it's super important that we jump in now while we're in this phase, because we're running on less hormones. Some women will take HRT, as we've discussed, others won't. As I said, the HRT isn't enough. It can bring the brain back to function better and all the rest, but it's not enough, because we now know that Alzheimer's in particular, which is a huge high risk for women, has other contributing factors such as your blood sugar, your insulin levels, your inflammation levels. Oxygen is a huge one. People think, you know, they say to me, you know, the people in my group, we talk about oxygen in particular, and they say to me, you know, I'm breathing, aren't I? You know, and I explain to them how much oxygen is necessary for brain health. And it's necessary because you have to remember that when you eat, say you eat all the best foods for your brain, well, your brain is up here. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't have gravity on its side. So you need a pump that pumps all those nutrients to the brain. And our brain has a requirement of 45 different nutrients that it needs. Some of those are different to what the body needs. So it has different requirements. So eating the best diet, how do you get those nutrients to the brain? You need oxygen to get the pumping those nutrients to your brain to feed. And that pump requires oxygen and circulation. And I have women who have cold hands, cold feet. What is that a sign of? Lack of circulation, lack of proper blood circulation. Those women will experience problems later in life with their brains, because lack of blood circulation, lack of oxygen is, is no good for our brain. So
How do we
that's
get
why.
that?
Sorry?
How do we get more oxygen up there? Is that exercise?
Exercise, absolutely, exercise. And if you're someone who has poor circulation, then you need to look into that. You can bring up your blood circulation through dietary measures as well. There's things like ginkgo, the ginkgo berry, for example. People who have Raynaud's disease, they have these cold fingers, where their blood circulation is cut off. A lot of them will take the ginkgo supplement, and that helps to get the pumping better blood circulation to the body. So their fingers actually, warm up, they're white, the tops generally. And so, the results have showed, they've done a lot of studies on that showing, that ginkgo is really, really great at bringing back. And I take ginkgo myself purely for getting everything to my brain. Oxygen is huge because women, especially going, down the stress route again, women say to me, but I'm breathing, Tonya, what's the big deal? But a lot of people are shallow breathing, they're breathing from kind of here up, and that's not getting enough oxygen to your brain. So, look at your breathing, put in your meditation, as we said, find those ways to add in all the little pieces of the jigsaw as such. But you have to remember that this time in life is a what would you say? It's a window of neural vulnerability, and it's really important if we don't want to end up with any of the dementias, particularly Alzheimer's, because that's the one that women seem to suffer from later down the line. And another thing, I'm just going to slot this in as well, which is coming up, I'm studying at the moment, anyone who's hyperthyroidism, if that is not controlled properly, is actually one of the contributing drivers for dementia and Alzheimer's.
Hypo or hyper?
Hypothyroid.
That's
So-
the underactive, yeah.
That's the underactive.
If somebody is hypothyroid and it's not managed properly, then yes, they are very high at risk of developing brain degeneration further down the line. So really important. I'm hypo as well, and that's why I'm finding it amazing, and hypothyroidism, majority of the time has an autoimmune element to it. You can have brain autoimmunity as well. Sometimes, they go hand in hand. So that's another area, if any women, because it's very common in women to be hypothyroid in menopausal years, that you make sure that your thyroid condition is managed properly, that you're getting enough thyroid hormone, because that poses you as a risk later down the line.
Actually, I've literally just signed up on a Hashimoto's course.
Oh,
because,
fantastic.
Literally, and I was thinking, should I or shouldn't I? And just speaking to you today makes
Has
me realize
confirmed.
that I absolutely should, because it's like a real in-depth thing. And I just thought, is that where I want to put my energies? But actually, thank you, because
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad, because I
yeah.
know myself, I have hypothyroidism, and I don't want to end up there, and I am, heavily studying that at the moment from a clinical perspective. But it's one that's very overlooked in terms of brain health. Yeah.
Yes. And actually, one of the things that I've been a bit confused with, if you don't mind me saying, is this menopause, or is this thyroid, or is it both?
Absolutely. And it's so hard to differentiate, because there's such an overlap in symptoms. But that's where you've got to become really, really good at listening to your body, monitoring symptoms, going through what is what, because the overlap is very, very similar. And, for women like that, they say, like, don't, it's not necessary to blood test to determine what, where you're at in your menopause journey. But if you're hypothyroid, I would be testing your estrogen and all your other hormonal levels as well, just so you can rule out that it's not that and it's not hypothyroid, you know, because the overlap is huge.
I'm
But
gonna
you know,
jump in. Sorry,
will we?
I'm gonna jump in. I can tell.
Do it. Sorry.
No, it's all right. I can tell this conversation can go on and on. And I kind of don't like to, but I think we need to kind of wrap up.
yeah,
But what I will say is, in this community, this is not social media, this is not Facebook or Instagram. You can connect with one another. So do take the conversation out of here and connect with one another and ask questions. And if you'd like Tonya to come back and do another one, then just let me know and we'll do another virtual cafe with Tonya. But I think as we're nearly at an hour, I'm really sorry.
Yes.
I'm going to say we'll close for now. Thank you all
Thank you.
coming along, for listening, for taking time,
Shirley?
asking questions. Yeah, go on, Pam.
Have you I noticed we
It's
were asked if we
recorded.
were right about recording.
Yes.
Have you recorded any of the previous weeks?
Technically, I was a little bit challenged for the first couple of weeks, so no. Last week's was recorded, so I think I've got the hang of it now, which means this will be uploaded in events.
It's the last couple of weeks I haven't managed to
Last week was, Pam, but the ones before,
Okay.
unfortunately not. Yeah.
Does the video get recorded or just audio?
It's video, but it's only people in community that can see it. This is not accessible to anyone outside the community. All right. Yeah, as I say, any questions, any comments, any suggestions? I've created this community so you can create your own posts. You can, you can pretty much do what you like within reason. So thank you all. Please stay in touch. And I'm really, really grateful you've all shown up and taken part. Thank you. Bye for now.
thank you, Shirley.
Thank
And
you.
I'd like to say, if anyone wants to narrow, my area or my field down, put some comments and, I can target that rather than it being quite a vague, if you're interested in certain things, and we can possibly maybe do another one based on, what you'd like, what you like more of.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Tonya, and
Thank
thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Lovely to be with you. Bye.
Bye.